a bit right. Maybe we can both stay here. Would you be okay? Because it's going to be, it's going to be brief. We're okay? All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session as part of the World Higher Education Conference. In this session, we are going to be talking about a critical topic, one of the SDGs, something that is transversal to everything we do within higher education and beyond, and that is gender. We're going to talk about how universities can contribute to gender equality, and we will give you a global perspective on this topic. This session is a collaboration between the UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean, that's UNESCO IESALC, and the Times Higher Education. I have here with me Elizabeth Shepherd. She's the team leader for consulting services at the Times Higher Education. I'm Dr. Victoria Galamuros. I'm the Chief of Research and Analysis at UNESCO IESALC. The way we're going to structure this session, at the very beginning, we will be presenting the results of two reports. One that was launched in March, another one that we're launching today, and that we've done the two organizations together in collaboration. And after that, we're going to have 3 fireside chats. And they are going to be with one gender and higher education experts and 2 university rectors. They will be presented afterwards properly. So here we're going to start just commenting about the work that we've done together, these 2 organizations that were different but complementary in this respect, and also with a common goal of improving universities' contribution to SDGs in general, and particularly to SDG 5, that's gender. As mentioned, the first part of this was launched the 8th of March this year because of the International Women's Day, but we thought that wasn't enough, so we continue working on that, and we are launching the second part of that work today. We're bringing here some insights, some small findings of the 2 reports. As a very broad context, we would like to start, I guess, celebrating the progress that have been done until now in regards to higher education and gender. If we have something to celebrate, is female studentship, is how much more female have access to higher education, progress through and succeed in higher education. There are still some regions of the world that haven't reached parity, but most of them have, and globally, women or female are more in higher education than males since 2005. However, this celebration about female, you could say, advantage in higher education, it doesn't really translate further. That means when female finished, the situation in the labor market, it's not better. And if we looked at within higher education institutions, some of them go to academia, but then it fades when you get to senior positions and professorships. There are still very few as well in leadership positions within universities. So we wonder if they are there, if they study what happened later, what are universities maybe missing there. Still, women are less in some fields. We all know the big gap that are in women and STEM, which we all know is going to be critical for the future. Institutional governance bodies, we're also missing still a lot of women. So yes, some lights and some shadows on this topic. We looked at something, when we looked at the context, we looked at governmental interventions. Why do we look at policy? Because what a government does in a country regarding gender is the play field for a university. There's some countries, actually over 50, that they do have a national strategy about gender, which is fully transversal, but obviously gives a much better place to be if you want to look at it from that perspective for a university. They have laws and regulation or national plans about this. If we go to a specific measure that promotes female leadership within an institution, which is particularly the problem for higher education institutions, we see that some countries also have non-discrimination policy. They might not have the overall plan, but they do have monitoring and evaluation policies about gender, non-discrimination policies that are also very useful because universities are obliged to comply with those. But then there are some countries that make specific policies that specifically target higher education institutions or target the public sector, and therefore they target public higher education institutions directly. Some countries are imposing female quotas. That was the case of Austria, for example. They did it. There is also policies that encourage specifically female professors. This happened in the Netherlands a few years ago, that they wanted to create a lot, promote women professors, and also a specific R&D budget that is sort of saved or allocated to women. All those are also specific policies that comes from the, could be regional or national government, that make the situation much better for universities. And now we go inside the universities. We also did some research about what are universities doing. Believe me, we could be here talking for another couple of days if I bring all the initiatives that they're doing. So we're just bringing a glimpse of what is happening. Gender is transversal. Gender is in all the missions of the university, plus the management. In teaching and learning, we're seeing how more and more universities are integrating this gender lens or gender approach to teaching materials. There are some universities that know that before doing this, they need to actually deconstruct, they need to learn all these perceptions on these dominated fields or subject for male. So first it's about erasing our own thoughts before we put new ones in. And also teacher training on gender equality. If we want to do this, we need to tell teachers how to do it. So more and more universities are taking care of this as well. In respect to research, is also this gender lens about how do we do research and how do we consider women in research. I think the days in which this medical research and this clinical trial were made only on male, I'd like to think they're over, please. This is as a more obvious example, but for everything else, women are not considered in research either. When we talk about doing research in the topic of gender, we'll see more gender centers appearing in different universities to do research on gender. But we also know that female researchers, we've seen before, they need support. More mentoring programs of female, so the mentor and the mentoree are both female, and they help them to navigate the environment. It's psychological support, and it shows them how to better, hopefully, reach senior positions. And the last one will be within the university, the administration and management of the university. I think universities should be the example of an organization that promote female, that comes from the non-discrimination policies that start by the hiring and go all the way like to promotion and any other conditions. It could be about equal parental leaves for staff, for example. It could be having childcare available for staff, for students as well. And it could also be about getting gender disaggregated data of their own students, of their own staff, so they can analyze it and then they can make evidence-based decisions on that. And with that as a background, I will lead my colleague Elizabeth to tell you a little bit about the data.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and thanks to our wonderful partners in this endeavour. As Victoria said, we launched the first part of our report on International Women's Day, and just a few hours ago, the second part has gone live online. And I would encourage everybody, as we only have a very short period of time this morning, to download that report and read it. And if you have any questions on the data or any of the evidence that has been presented there, then please reach out to us. We'd love to continue the discussions going forward. So at Times Higher Education, we, in 2019, created a measurement of universities' contributions to the 17 SDGs. The first of its kind, we asked universities to submit to anywhere between 1 and all 17 of the SDGs, submitting data to many different indicators, over 200 indicators in total, to allow us to begin to monitor and evaluate universities' contribution and commitment to the SDGs. Of course, The focus of this report and the data we will present today are on SDG 5, gender equality. And I would just like to say, I'm so glad we have a diverse audience in the room. It's very important that both men and women participate in these conversations. So I thank you all for coming to see the outcomes from this report and the presentation today. So the first part of our report, which was published early this year, focused on the data that we gathered in 2021. And this was from 776 universities all around the world, told us the way in which they believed they were contributing toward the achievement of the goals of SDG 5. So in 2022, we published the data in April this year. The extraordinary increase in participation, 938 universities, and we'll see the global distribution of this shortly, participated and gave us that data, told us about what they were doing. SDG 5 gathers data under 6 headings, and these are research on gender equality, the proportion of first-generation female students, student access measures, the proportion of senior female academics, much in the way in which Victoria has just described, the proportion of women receiving degrees, and finally, women's progress measures. As you can see, we gathered this data from over 101 countries, so it's given us, I believe, for the first time, extraordinary insight into how universities are working toward greater gender equality in their countries. And we can see on the slide in front of us the regional distribution of the 2021 and 2022 submission to SDG 5. So growing quite considerably in Asia and also in Europe. Relatively static in South America, North America, and tiny growth in Africa. We encourage every university from around the world to participate in this exercise, as it allows us to really begin to understand the contribution around the world. Here, an illustration of a heat map showing where these universities are. The lighter the colour, the greater the submission to SDG 5 from universities around the world. We are almost achieving entire global coverage. So this data set has become so incredibly powerful. So what does the data begin to tell us? Approximately 52% of female students overall, with a slight increase over the last 7 years. So again, we're seeing a larger proportion of female students within institutions submitting. The percentage of female students is also increasing in every subject area. But the fastest increase, and wonderful to hear, is in business and economics and computer science. So within the literature, what we understand is that these are subjects that are not traditionally oriented toward female career academic pathways. So this is a really wonderful finding. However, some subjects already with more female and male students are moving further away from parity. And these include life sciences and psychology. So we are moving with greater distance away from achieving gender parity in those subject areas. And of course, a very important topic for us all to understand, STEM subjects. There are a large difference between representation in computer science and engineering versus life sciences and physical sciences. So although we are seeing progress, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. This, I think, is a really interesting graphic illustration of exactly that point. The percentage of female students and the distance to parity. And we can see that there is real contrast when we look across the subjects, the aggregated subject level, at the 11 subject level. We can see progress in some areas, but others where there is a real issue when it comes to parity. So I described the 6 categories under which we gather 18 specific indicators. And these allow us to, as it shows here, track the progression within institutions throughout the student pipeline, throughout the journey, and how universities are providing equitable access for women to enter higher education, how they are supporting them whilst they're in education, much like Victoria mentioned, childcare measures, different types of accessible funding, particularly for female students, and also allows us to look at progress and success, including mentoring schemes, graduation rates, and looking at how females not only enter tertiary education, but how they succeed, which I think is incredibly important. And I think my final slide looks across these three areas: access, support, and progress. And we have divided this data, just a very simple representation. And I again would encourage you to look at the final report and all of its contents. But we can look at the ways in which universities, from which we have been able to gather data, have policies and practices in these three key areas: access, support, and progress. And the picture is quite contrasting. But you'll note that in most cases, across all of these large geographical areas, that the progress measures are the ones that are least prioritized, or indeed least evidenced by the universities that took part in this exercise. And I believe that's, in summary, some final points. The report has shown us that gender equality in enrollment figures is improving, as we can see in the literature and in the wonderful statistics that have been provided by our UNESCO host of the conference, that there are now more females in tertiary education than males. This is moving in a positive direction, but rather than toward true equity, where there is higher representation from male students or less representation from male students in certain areas. Improving access is a very good first step, but more active support measures, thinking about supporting women in the completion and the progression and into those important senior roles of leadership in tertiary education, is really, really important. And of course, universities in countries with higher levels of gender equality might think they don't need to implement specific measures, but often they perform in relative terms worse in terms of female underrepresentation in STEM subjects. And at that point, I'll hand back to Victoria, who's going to introduce the next part of our talk.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thanks, everyone. As Elizabeth mentioned, the two reports are available online in both websites, and any questions or any interest in continuing the conversation, we are always eager and interested in doing so. The second part of this session that we're going to have, and I advanced before, is going to be 3 different fireside chats. As for those not familiar with the topics, these are quite informal and I guess close, intimate, you could say, conversations with someone who we believe brings an interesting perspective, interesting stories into this topic. I am going to welcome to the stage to Gloria Bonder, Professor Gloria Bonder. She is the director of the Department of Gender, Society and Policies of Flaxo, which is the Latin American Social Sciences faculty in Argentina. She coordinates the UNESCO Regional Chair on Women's Science and Technology in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the online master program on Gender, Society and Policies. She's also the coordinator of Global Network of UNESCO Chairs on Gender. And since 2014, she coordinates the Latin American and the Caribbean Focal Point on Gender Insight, which is a global initiative aimed at influencing policymakers in science, technology, innovation, engineering to integrate gender equality principles and goals. She also was distinguished by UNESCO as one of the 60 women worldwide who has helped accomplish the organization's goals, representing the voices, aspirations, and visions of many women all around the world. It's a pleasure to have you here, Gloria Bonder. I'm about to sit with you here. Please.
Where I sit?
Let's use the ones in the middle. We're alone. We can do that.
Okay.
Okay, so as I said, honored to have you here, someone with much experience on this topic, someone that started advocating for gender when this topic was not an SDG 5, for example. So thanks, I guess, on behalf of all women, thank you. Thanks for the work you've done for all of us. I would like to start asking you a very simple but complicated question, just probably out of curiosity. And it's about, for someone like you, what is gender equality?
Okay. Well, first I want to thank for the invitation. Oh, I was supposed to speak in Spanish. Pero primero voy a hablar en español.
I shall speak in Spanish.
Translation from Spanish to English. You have the headphones just at the entrance, okay?
Sí. No, sí, claro que puedo hablar en inglés.
Of course, I could speak in English, but I think it is good that, as we're in a Spanish-speaking country, and a Catalan-speaking country, as I come from a Spanish-speaking country, I shall speak in Spanish, therefore. Makes sense. This has many connotations. It has to do with equality, equity, and justice. Not, in this case, gender, but cultural and linguistic equity and equality. So I shall speak in Spanish. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I was delighted when I received it because, well, for many, many years, working on these subjects with some achievements, but I was rather cautious because the world in which we live is a very world fraught with uncertainties, which does not move towards progress, justice and equality, I'm afraid. In many areas of the world, and in particular in one where I live, is no exception, there are political decisions and economic decisions which are threatening democracy and threatening the achievements we have obtained, the freedom we have obtained. The context in which we live in is such that we are seeing setbacks. There are certain achievements which seemed to be battles won forever, which is not the case. We're going backwards. So what is gender equality for me? It's what the UN Convention states is there equality in rights and opportunities for all. Okay, that's a formal concept which could lead to what I call the mirage of equality. To ensure that institutions achieve genuine equality of rights does not mean that that be a case in practice, institutional culture, in distribution of resources, and so on. Which is why we talk of gender equality, of course, but we also include gender equity, right? Because we believe that there are situations where equality is just a mere facade, a disguise. For instance, let me give you some examples. In politics, in quota regulations, or in scholarships, there's like affirmative action policies in many areas. There is the opportunity to enjoy the same rights right from the outset. Right? The points of departure may be different, and equality. And if we look at universities,
how do we see this gender equality within, universities, whether this is education or science, extending it to science and technology as well?
Bueno, yo creo que el informe que presentaron, que les...
Well, I think that the report which you presented, which is great, is a good X-ray, if you like, a photokit picture of what happens with figures, with numbers. We have also carried out many studies of what happens within universities, in interpersonal relationships in particular, in institutional culture. Institutional culture are slow to change, is very slow to change. And let me give you an example. There are more women in certain fields of science, but our studies bear out that their path is fraught with difficulties and stumbling blocks. There are bullying behavior, bullying behavior of violence even, which stem from traditional male culture, if you like, and women suffer this. So what are the alternatives for women? Either to adapt or to change. Much of what we are doing with these seminars and so on is to recognize both men and women, attempt to recognize where these symbolic areas of interpersonal relationships which reproduce certain unacceptable behavior, and women do not have to adapt. They should not have to adapt to these cultural attitudes. They must change, and not just women, because there are males who are not aggressive, who don't sort of parade an overbearing, almost aggressive leadership. Should also have that. I'd like to ask you what you've commented. There are two options, either to adapt or change the rules. And you have been working for a number of decades in this area. What do you see? Women who tend to adapt, or women who wish to change and go ahead and change? Both. I've seen both. Let's see. There are women who go into these areas, or above all, many if you like, careers such as engineering fields or computational science, which are male-dominated, right? And I see women, and they're not many. They tend to buckle down and adapt. If we had time, I'd give you examples of behavior which leads to adaptation, but they do not wish to go into positions of risk. And there are women, and in particular in Latin America, I should say, there have been much advance, big advances, in particular with youth who have become empowered, and they have attempted to enter these kind of areas of male preserve, right? But there is still a certain duality, if you like, and much work has to be done. One thing is very important. It is based on dynamics within universities with both men and women. It, above all, is who runs a project, who signs off reports, who receives a grant or a scholarship, who is going to represent the university at a congress. There are all these micro decisions which which will be filled. And I remember a conference which said something like, as it was in English, I'll try and translate it on the hop into Spanish. It's not just looking at data which are gender, are divided up by gender, but also interpreting the data. We have a lot of data, but we need a lot of conversation and dialogue around these data to understand how these data can be interpreted with their deep meaning and what we can do as an upshot to change the situation. And I think you are the ideally placed person to help us. Academics, students who can help us. Well, I would say that data are important. It's important to have them at our fingertips, because I have worked in many projects, even with European institutions, talking of equality policies. There's a door of entry, right? But we have to look at the reality as well. Do you know why do things happen? A Spanish colleague talked of data and those who publish them. We see a difference between men and women and universities. But we have to interpret them with gender categories. Well, in OECD, I had a boss: if you don't have data, all you've got are opinions. So we always have this culture of data-based culture, but we are very aware of the need to interpret matters, right? I'd like to review, and we could be here for hours and hours, right, talking about these subjects, but of course the time does press on. And we know that gender is transversal, cross-cutting in an institution. Could we be more specific and talk of gender and education? Let's look at the first mission of education and of the university, right? Of university. What are universities doing to improve diversity and equality? But what is the most common feature? Where could we start? Well, I'll attempt to be brief. Obviously, we need policies of equality. Policies or instruments or tools, if you like. Right? Not just good intention, that's not enough. We need to take hard commitments, formal commitments with dollar signs behind them, with budgets. We have a project with the US and Europe, funded by the EU, called Act on Gender. It is a project working with many universities in Europe and Latin America, 14 in Latin America, and we are working in communities of practice, which is a methodology which is very collaborative and active in nature, and I would recommend it, to attempt to evaluate plans, programs, policies, commissions, roadmaps within universities. And there should be a commitment to tackle the issues, the problems that arise, and agree on a series of measures to attempt to fulfill, to comply with these plans and so on. One key aspect, and it comes from Beijing, going back a few years, go back to the Beijing conference, which is the gender approach in art practices and in syllabuses. It's no good to have protocols against violence, but we should also we must not accept visions of reality, and I refer to cinema and TV. Well, I'm putting on my academic hat. Nobody has told me how to do that, right? We are doing it, and in this program, Act on Gender, that is and the second stage will be Inspire, and that is our line, to provide skills building, the skill sets, and use non-sexist language, deconstructing, if you like, the syllabus content, and also looking at pedagogical practices. And I can talk of any social matter or policy, but of course, we cannot always assume that the subject is male, but there's much theoretical research from gender on anthropology and so on in all fields. This must be incorporated or mainstreamed into the policy. Well, how do we incorporate that? Well, gender lend, I liked it, but let me share something with you. It's not gender lend, it's gender click. It's gender click, many millions of genders, because it's not only if you carry out research taking is a universal subject, the male, and extending the conclusions of the whole population. It's not just that looking at, you are constructing a cultural narrative where males are the ones who represent society. And I think when it comes to training, part of the necessary policies are awareness creation and training of teachers to review the epistemological basis and methodological basis of their doctrines, and how we can incorporate all that into gender. Well, I'd like to ask so many questions on each and every one of the subjects you touched upon, but unfortunately we don't have that much time, and I'd like to respect the other speakers. But I do have one last question for you. There are many university leaders who insist on improving gender perspective, but they don't quite know how to do it. And if you had to just say 1, 2, or 3 things which you consider specific, concrete, and sort of like clues which are efficient and don't take up too much time, where would we start? Well, let's see. Tough, because 2 or 3 I don't know, but let me insist on a book we've just published on our project, which is the following one. They're not. We don't want to do stopgap measures. A university must start stemming from its university policy. It must include mainstream gender equality, not something to be added on, right? And again, we can't say, okay, we're tackling violence. It's great, but we must have. We're going to organize some awareness creation seminars. But no, it has to go beyond that. The university policy must see what measures should be taken, what resources, both funding and human resources, to ensure that this is part and parcel of your policy. So that's my current struggle. Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much. A big round of applause for our speaker.
Going to say, obviously I didn't know the answer that she was going to give to my last question, but that leads me into saying that as part of our research, we did identify lots of good practices here and there, but then we identify, and I start getting my way out, so just to be more dynamic, we identify 5 universities, 1 in every region of the world, the way UNESCO sees regions of the world, that we're doing specifically like very, very good work, what we consider to be forerunners. We are very lucky today here to have a general rector and a president of 2 of those 5 universities, one from Latin America and the other one from Asia. So I'm going to give now the floor to my colleague Elizabeth, that is going to have the first conversations with one of the rectors, and then I'll come back a bit later. Please, Elizabeth, I'll let you there to introduce and do the fight chat.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you for your wonderful, your insights that you were sharing this morning, Gloria. That was wonderful. Thank you. So to our second fireside chat, and it gives me incredible honor to welcome Swami Amrita Pernanda Puri, President of Amrita University, and please forgive my pronunciation. If I may, Swami is the president of Amrita University, a private university in Coimbatore, India, with 7 campuses and 16 constituent schools. He is also vice chairman of the Metta Amrita Andamami Math Spiritual and Charitable Foundation, being head disciple of renowned humanitarian and spiritual leader. He holds a master's degree in philosophy and is a renowned author and translator. He has written The Irresistible Attraction of Divinity and The Color of the Rainbow, Compassionate Leadership. Welcome, President. Please join us on the stage for our conversation.
Sit here.
Yes, please. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I would like to, well, first of all, thank you for your wonderful contribution. And to reiterate my earlier comment that I think the discussion of SDG 5 and gender equality has to involve men. And I look forward to hearing so much of the incredible work that you are leading at your incredible institution. So if I may begin. We can understand and know that Amrita's mission statement highlights the following: education for life, an approach that is described as compassion-driven research. And I go back to our earlier comments where you said that this is all important to you. So my first question would be, how does your institution's commitment to engagement with communities differ from other higher education institutions in India? And really specifically, can you describe how this has impacted the university's contribution to the SDGs overall, and particularly gender equality, SDG 5?
Thank you very much. Allow me to begin by saying where we at Amrita draw our inspiration and guidance. Our Chancellor, Amma, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, guides all the institutional and humanitarian activities either directly or by example. The dictum, education for life and education for living, is her vision and mission. For example, it was this vision that gave shape to Live-in Labs. And Live-in Labs is a program that brings together students, faculty from Amrita, as well as from other universities around the world to form multidisciplinary teams that spend as many as 6 months in Indian villages. Through their exposure to the actual situations in the villages, the Live-in Labs participants develop a more realistic understanding of the needs of the India's underserved. Steeped in this understanding, they are then able to solve the problems through multidisciplinary approaches. The outcome is education is tangible and transformative. we find the program not only brings about an external change, an external transformation in the villagers, in their outlook, but also an internal change in the hearts of the students as well. In this manner, and we train the students from, there are two types of students, some come to day scholars, they come from outside. And then there are students trained in our own schools. So they are more receptive to this. So we have a number of students in each of our university campuses who come from our own schools. So in this manner, the students are engaged in mutual learning and sharing experiences with people of the villages. The barriers of labs and classrooms themselves are broken down in order to implement theoretical knowledge to address real-world problems. She was speaking about real-world problems. So from a realistic point of view, I think it is very important to listen to people, especially when you go to the villages or the so-called illiterate people, uneducated people. It is important to listen to them not just with your ears, external ears, but with your inner ear, your heart, and reflect on them, and then assimilate what you have gathered, and then practice, translate that into action. So listening, reflecting, assimilating, and practicing. These are very important, I think. So then, these students, they are equipped. They prepare themselves to understand the most important areas, such as education, health and well-being, energy, water and sanitation, waste management and agriculture, environment, livelihood, gender equality, climate change and risk management, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. Thus, while transforming the institutional landscape, the faculty and students at Amrita are able to press gender equality issues with a myriad of sustainable solutions. So this is happening in 108 villages across India. Take the example of the problem of the rural women's access to quality education in the remote rural areas. A concern often addressed at several sessions at this conference. So a multidisciplinary group of our students addressed the lack of teachers, quality teachers, infrastructure, connectivity, power, and in particular, women's mobility issues. Because in the remote Indian villages, they don't have, either they are not allowed to travel long distances, or they don't have the transportation facilities. So by developing specially designed e-content for vocational trades that were in local languages, designed for low literacy populations, delivered through tablets and computers that were taken to remote communities in a specially designed van that would unfold as a classroom, powered by solar energy through a platform that ran on online or offline mode. And this particular effort was featured in the Niti Aayog as a best practice for several years. So empowering women is best exemplified by our Amrita projects that are trained in the Amrita Shri, that's the name of the project. So it has trained a whopping 250,000 rural women across India for vocational skills and micro enterprises, leading to decent work, life enrichment, and economic self-reliance. And we have helped these women start their own home-based businesses like cottage industries, powered by vocational training and microfinance. Yet another project is Shakti Cone, promotes the participation of young women in coding and AI. In general, we are training women in rural and urban areas to leverage good governance and democracy to ensure that their communities are able to fulfill their basic needs. And in this manner, we are helping to generate women community leaders at a grassroots level.
Gosh, that's such an incredible insight and case studies. Thank you for sharing. If I may, you mentioned in the design of those projects some challenges that you have faced. And I know the context of India, the rural communities, the remoteness you describe. Can you give us some insight into those challenges that you faced when designing these projects that specifically are designed to support the women in your university and local community?
Now, the first and foremost challenge is to get the cooperation and understanding of men.
Yeah. I'm glad we have many here today.
Yeah. But when I said that, I should also add that there are men with feminine heart and women with masculine heart. So that should also be accepted. So it's not really on the appearance.
Okay.
It's
I understand.
The attitude. So when I say to get the cooperation or understanding of men, there are men who understand, but there are, majority maybe are not so understanding.
Absolutely.
So the first is to bring men along, particularly in administration and high-level management. Getting them to be committed to gender equality is the first hurdle. And this is something our Chancellor has been actively involved in. It is her sincerity and dedication to the issue that has helped us overcome many such challenges, because people see in her someone whose words and actions are in alignment, as we say, walk the talk. Mm-hmm. Here, I think good role models are essential. Our Chancellor often says that in every single area of life, in every single area of action, whatever be your profession be, wherever you are, irrespective of time and space, you need role models. In fact, everyone should try their best to become a role model, because someone somewhere is looking up to you for inspiration, even at home. So at Amrita, women have equal representation when it comes to formulating all high-level administrative policies, strategy, and troubleshooting. Also at Amrita, there is not a firm delineation between the branches of administration, research, and academics. Thus, people in all branches of the university are involved in such decision making. Also, we follow the policy in spirit, not just in letter. And that education for life also involves the finer aspects of human life of concepts, not just like GE, but also the 5 principles of education that Amma mentioned, such as organized workshops, events, research, and campaigns that expose the students and faculty not from an activist standpoint, the blaming game, that I'm right and you are wrong. But from a humanitarian standpoint, or with a touch of humaneness. So that means we are together. We are together, we are one, and let us move hand in hand. Taking into consideration the one principle, the oneness principle. The oneness principle, I think, it is becoming more and more evident. That sectarianism or the division or the barriers are disappearing, and the pandemic is one of the best examples. So who created the pandemic? Who created the climate change? Who created global warming? So it was coming in bits and pieces, and we never saw it. So, that oneness principle is most important, and our Chancellor gives so much emphasis on that. So we at Amrita also try to bring these principles into our subconsciousness, that how important it is for us to embrace these concepts. So GE is then assimilated in spirit. So actually, to just have a policy document itself, I would say, is masculine. No, I'm sorry, because if it is inflexible, if it is inflexible, flexibility is feminine, and inflexibility is masculine. So in some ways, our approach itself is feminine, as it is based on compassion. So to quote our Chancellor, a compassionate attitude should be the beginning and end of all actions in all areas of life. Or just to say it in a material sense, fair play, a fair attitude. So
thank you. You're sharing your philosophy is extraordinary. When we at Times Higher Education particularly have looked at universities' policies, it's not something I have ever thought
I think,
about.
just one correction, please. So sorry for the interruption. It's not a philosophy.
Okay.
It's life. Okay. It's about life. I'm sorry.
No, please don't apologize. We have just a couple of minutes. So if I may, turn to our next question that we will make our last. And really, I wanted just to dig into the area of STEM. Okay. India is renowned for having such a strong tertiary education sector. It's made absolute leaps and bounds in the past number of years. The sector has grown and is the best in the world in certain areas. But women are still underrepresented in STEM, where men perhaps are excelling in Indian tertiary education. Can you describe a little bit about your institution, what you're trying to do to support women, particularly in this area?
So there is a conscious effort to maintain gender balance among faculty, senior management, students in STEM education and projects. For instance, the Chancellor of Amrita University, Amma, has put women at the forefront of many departments and research teams. So this way, more than 70% of our research centers are headed by women, including many of the highest academic positions like Chancellor, Provost. See, Dr. Manisha is one of the provosts. And
joining us today.
The thing is, both our UNESCO chairs, directors of our UNESCO chairs are here, Dr. Bhavani Rao and Dr. Manisha Ramesh, and they are both women. So this has helped women express their creativity. I think creativity is very important. I mean, everyone has that. It just needs observation. I mean, if you observe something sincerely, in a focused manner, it leads to realization, real observation. So that means, to fall in love. I mean, whatever be your area of profession, just fall in love with that. So this has helped women express their creativity and attain their maximum inner potential, especially in the fields of research, with women scientists being recognized as among the 2 percentile among women scientists. For example, Dr. Manisha was one among them. And through strategies and programs open to all faculty, all students, and all disciplines, so as to promote equal and respectable cooperation across several levels, our women leadership allows removing hindrances created by managerial and financial systems that would have otherwise fostered inequality. So led by women deans, administrators, and departmental chairs, we have created a safe learning and teaching environment for female students and staff. So our schools have created and involved annual programs that allow women students and faculty to organize events within and outside the university, promoting solutions to issues related to women and the community. Regular student-teacher mentorship programs and problem and solution-centric counseling programs have been conducted across the campuses, and our policy mandates equal gender representation of girl students in all committees.
Brilliant.
So led by women scientists and faculty, Amrita has a strong community investment in encouraging women and girls in science. Coupled with what happens at the institution, as I told before, our faculty works with the K-12 schools, encouraging kids, girls, to take up STEM fields. So by conducting STEM and makerspace workshops, 21st century skill training, and more. So with this demystifying science by promoting role models, current and historical women in all fields of action, and knowledge helps ease the entry of women into these fields, creating the supportive social environment.
Thank you so much for sharing your policies, your activities, but I think most clear your commitment at the university to gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the President for his wonderful contribution.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will now hand back to my co-presenter, Victoria, for our final fireside chat. Victoria, take the stage.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you very much, the president of an institution that is surrounded by women. Everywhere else in the leadership, so very, very good example, very inspired. I really wish we had more time for each of these chats, considering all the interesting stories these different people need to bring here today about gender. Last but not least, definitely last but not least, we are bringing here to the stage another rector of another forerunner university in gender equality. It's the University of Guadalajara in Mexico. He's the rector, Ricardo Villanueva Lomeli, and of course he's gonna get stuck now and I cannot read your bio. Yes, here you are, perfect. So Professor Villanueva is the general rector, because there are several rectors, it's a huge university, of the University of Guadalajara in Mexico since 2019 until 2025. He's a lawyer by training, with a master, a PhD, and a PhD in educational technology. He's a professor in law since 2002. He has co-authored over 25 books and many other publications and participated in multiple research projects. During his career, he has been also gaining insight for actually pretty much everything. You were a student representative first, but also he's been in government, and he has different positions within academia, in administration, and in leaderships, until today, who is a rector of the university. Please welcome Rector Ricardo Villanueva.
Hola.
Un placer. We'll be speaking Spanish from now on, so just for those that arrive a bit later and don't have the headphones are just there, and you will immediately have English or French translation.
So, good afternoon. I think it is the afternoon. So good afternoon to you, and welcome, Rector. We're going to have a small chat about the journey of the University of Guadalajara to reach where you are today, which is internationally recognized university, recognized for many, many things, including the work you do there concerning gender equality. We've begun by looking at another actor. He said something recently, something important, and you will tell me whether I'm right or wrong. You said to the government in Mexico, which at a given moment in time gave you financing, sort of financial help, to promote gender equality, which includes something including gender equality. This is in 2016. We need to recognize, therefore, that there are internal and external efforts being made by governments. But of course, this epic stage has now come to an end. My question is, what entailed this input from the government? And how did you take to continue within your institutions to carrying out your policies and activities which you've maintained to date? Well, thank you very much, Victoria. And thanks to Elizabeth for this welcome, for the invitation. And sometimes we give information and we not even realize what we're doing. Okay, this is what we're here for in Barcelona. So thank you very much again. Indeed, there are federal government funds which were given to us, which have been used for quality of education in general, but until 2014, when the country says that the aim of the quality of education needed to cover gender policies too. And in 2015, the University of Guadalajara participated we got these funds for the first time in 2015, and in 2016, we were given direct financing to begin a diagnosis. I believe the first part, which was very useful, and Gloria gave some figures, but we now know where we are as an institution. Since 2016, we've had direct financing. We've carried out a diagnosis to see what our university was at in these matters. So using this diagnosis, we've raised awareness, and after raising an awareness, we come to capacity building. We've invested in this, and after this, we're going back to awareness raising, because we saw things which we'd not detected before. And for gender equality, people are really, really highly aware that things need to be done. And so we went back to awareness raising, and from that we passed on to action. This is where we are today. We're talking about Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and we are working on this, using this information which we started in 2016. We had to see how gender equality was standing now. I want to see how at the secondary school level, for example, we could begin to raise awareness amongst girls and women in general. And as we went to postgraduate and undergraduate courses, we saw this clear phenomenon here, that how women from the age of 20 onwards began to lose women in all the fields of education. And so we wanted to overcome, for example, the image of women as being simply there for childbearing. So we've used this diagnosis, which have enabled us to roll out different practices in the university. One is to make the whole thing cross-cutting in different areas, specific areas. But again, in Guadalajara, it means that all our planning and our programming and syllabuses, it runs right through all faculties and all levels, and gender is included. It's transversal, it's cross-cutting, which is, no small deal. Rather than top-down, you've stopped bottom-up. And so I also like your point about the need of carrying out a diagnosis and really needing to roll out some action plans which are really necessary. And of course, these plans complement each other. And one of the activities which you have was a whole series of courses, not only on gender equality and sexual harassment, but some of them are obligatory, these courses for undergraduates. Could you give us more information about this? How have they gone down by both genders when you said that these courses about gender are mandatory? How has this changed people's mindset? Well, yes. There's always resistance. But, of course, the fact that there is resistance doesn't mean that things are not going to change. And, of course, resistance does form part of change itself. And so we are changing people's mindsets. I've always thought that the most important thing we're living through is, in humankind, is this idea of gender. The most important institution was invented by humankind are universities. So I do believe that universities should be the driving force by this change, driving force behind change in civilizations. We have two UNESCO chairs, in fact, in our university, one about gender equality and one about development. And so we are now seeing gender as a central pillar. And of course, using this today, we cannot work in the University of Guadalajara if you do not follow a course of this nature. We've come up with a book in the university, and anyone who wants to work there needs to do one of these courses in gender.
For any academic, any researcher, any worker who wishes to access to a full-time post, improve their profile, must go through a gender awareness course. We attempt to carry out much skill building.
100 personas.
And from today, all the calls for a human resource, one necessary requirement is gender awareness courses and training. Well, most important is the whole syllabus must have gender awareness mainstreamed into it. This is a challenge we have as a society, and as an academic, when my academic hat, nobody has told me how I can carry out my classes without or including gender mainstreaming. I still need to learn. I have to deconstruct part of myself as a male, and as a General Vice Chancellor I should start off with an example. I must preach with example. I have to start off, and then the rest will follow. But one of the most important things, we have the most important high education institution in Mexico, 100,000 students. And hopefully things were taught at home, but if not, in primary school and secondary school. Now, we have freshmen, all the freshmen in the University of Guadalajara have an 18-week program where they look at gender perspective courses. And we have 2 generations of freshmen who are taught to experience a different masculinity and also attempt to empower women who don't need it at school. We already have it, but they have won a lot, if you like. It's a question of time, I should say. It has to do with language and the difference between sort of secondary education, higher education. Not all of the Mexican ones have the in the 2 years prior to entry, in the age range 16 to 18, that is when they should, that's when they have to do these gender awareness courses. And the University of Guadalajara is huge. And we're talking about 100,000, so that is huge, a huge number. What about, just an idea of order of magnitude, what other figures are we talking about? There are 100. It's a university with 320,000 students, second biggest in Mexico, and so we're talking of an impact of more than 300,000 students, plus all the teaching staff, the faculty. So you're talking of 3,000 faculty. So all the universities should have a gender agenda. And the impact of a university this size is very important. And the impact will be much higher. Fine, that is what you're showing us. And anyway, now that we have the last few closing minutes, I have another comment or question, if you like. What are the takeaways from all that? What are the lessons learned? You said you've had to start by preaching by example. And what are the most important lessons from all this process? Well, the first one is to look back into the past and get a bit ashamed. The university has 230 years history, and I became a vice chancellor of the university, and basically we were training lawyers, accountants, and all male. We had not provided degrees to any woman student. And I'm ashamed of that we've been around for 230 years, and now we are talking of many female students who are, if you like, graduates in law, in accountancy, in many other subjects as well. But there are two we now have 337 items. We are aware that we had to carry out a certain change from, if you like, credentials have a positive masculinity, but much remains to be done. There is huge resistance, of course, and we are often not aware of the ingrained masculinity. Everything is designed for men, even sort of in bathrooms where there were none for women. So much remains to be done, but we're on track, if you like. I can imagine that you, as a role model, as a preaching with example for all these students, is very important, right? If a woman was leading it, it'd be a different example for other people. But if your students, men, boys, males, can identify themselves with you, someone with these principles, these values, with this gender perspective, is the general vice chancellor of the university. And it's not a sign of weakness, all to the contrary. And I thought, well, my accreditation in the university, maybe they are designed for males, but and although the gender is male, I'll have to ask you to replace it. Well, ask my universities. We are changing the accreditations of the past, the degrees in the past. All the new titles and new accreditations are attempt to have a gender perspective, but that depends on the Secretary of State of Education. Not easy to go back in the past, but someone who in the past is a lawyer, abogado in Spanish, should be abogada in feminine. But we're going to seek it out with a view to facilitating this change insofar as possible. Last thought, looking to the future. The university has done much. Much things remain to be done. Where are we heading? What are the next challenges? What are the next opportunities? How is the university? Well, how are they going to continue as long as you are at the helm? Well, I have 2 more years. I think what is most difficult is this deconstruction. We are institutions, we have to educate, and that is our main purpose. And I think that if we solved education, many of the problems facing the human species would be solved. And I think that is the most difficult, the most tricky. It is easier to educate than to re-educate, because to re-educate you have to de-learn. You have to root out many ingrained attitudes, and so learning is easy, but to do away with common habits and ingrained male chauvinism, so deeply ingrained, is almost instinctive, and that is very, very difficult. It's this huge challenge of understanding how the university has to learn new things, and we are going through a learning process which is not easy. It is even painful, because we still have bullying, we still have harassment and there are many accusations of gender violence, gender harassment in our university. But we are there. Getting involved and at the front line, and I was the first vice chancellor for the 230 years of women who were not listened to vis-a-vis the Indian Wahara ethnics. So we must recognize that we did things wrong to be able to start this process of deconstruction, and the subject of gender should not be a subject. That is my hope, that one day we do not need special budget lines or special skills building courses, that it be so deeply rooted and deeply ingrained that gender equality and should be so ingrained, so natural, that we won't have to deal with this. We won't have to have these conversations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your encouraging words.
Ask the 2 speakers that were here before to come here again to the stage in case there are some questions from the audience. We do not have a lot of time for this because it just got a bit late with the fireside chat, but there was no way that we could do these chats any shorter. And I'm sure lots of things have been
Gracias.
It's still been unsaid, lots of challenges. In an hour and 15 minutes, we can only just go one step further and hopefully just give everyone a bit of inspiration. I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions. I see a hand there, so maybe we can start there.
Thank you very much. My name is Myriam Moïse, Université des Antilles in Martinique, the French Caribbean. I can speak English? I mean, it's whether English, French, or Creole. My Spanish is not good enough, so, you know.
No, it's okay. English is
It's okay with English? All right.
It's okay with English.
Gracias. My question regards gender equality. You spoke about gender equality, but it seems to be focusing on women. I wonder about these categories that some of the guests seem to repeat, because when we talk about femininity and masculinity, what is it? Because today we are at a time when we talk about the queer studies, about coming out of those categories. So I wonder what is the point of view of the guest speakers about this, moving beyond this etiquette, categorizing as feminine or masculine. Thank you very much.
I know this is not polite, but I feel that I have to say probably the first word. I mean, when I say it's not, it's not polite to put myself first and beyond then. But we wanted to go to with the presentation, we wanted to go so much to the point that I miss an important point. The important point that I missed today here, and that is in the report, is the fact that we are considering, and when we looked at policies, we actually looked at beyond, you know, we do look at all genders, and we went beyond the male and female. However, when we have to ask universities about figures and about data, unfortunately, they are still not considering all the genders. So we make a point in the report when we write about it and when we look at literature that we would love to go beyond that. However, data-wise, if we ask for that, the result is there's no data. So I just wanted to make that clarification on our side. And now I'll give the floor to our speakers to see how do you see that duality? How do we incorporate like the reality about new genders? Gloria?
Well, it's coming. Bueno, voy a hablar en español.
I'll speak in Spanish. Do you understand Spanish? Well, there is translation. Well, I'll talk about Argentina, not all Latin America. We have a law of gender identity which does recognize decisions taken by the person on their own gender identity. Man, woman, queer, whatever. Whatever. That, on the one hand, there is this law enshrined in the statute book, and universities have to respect that. We have just gone through a national census process, and this was 2 days ago, so I had to fill it in before coming here. And the census, for the first time, when it says your sex, your gender, it is attributed gender category. That's pretty impressive. So we're going to have population data where we will know not just if we're male, female, but other attributed categories. So I do think we are moving forward in that respect. And this will be reflected in theory. There are many diverse theories, studies, taking queers or other approaches, and in what I was saying, in skill building, we include attributed gender and everything that is that implies, and not recognize as a male or whatever. The interpreters would like to respectfully mention that the interpreting time is up. I'm afraid that the interpreters will now, in a few minutes, will close. We have cases of students who have changed gender, and we have taken the steps, they have not suffered, to change their gender in university. As a university, we are full of respect the attributed sex, and we have carried out changes, but I still believe that it is a gender where much remains to be done. I say interpreters' time is up.
So, I think we should also consider the tradition, the customs and habits, the social scenario of every country. You know, for example, the Indian scenario, people are very reluctant to come forward and disclose this, you know, such personal things, because they feel very ashamed, and they also fear that the society will brand them, isolate them, and then sometimes even the families. I mean, maybe not in the cities, but you know, in the rural areas, it still happens. So socially, we have to go a long way forward to realize this beyond thing. But we do have gender clinics for all kinds of gender identification.
All right.
Yeah, we have vocational training for transgender groups and more. So, but the thing is, we could only cover so much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think, you know, we should seriously consider the traditions of a country, because the customs and the habits, and you know, for India, as far as India is concerned, it is, you know, it's a very traditional country. Even though there is a lot of, I mean, developments in on the materialistic side, but still people are shy.
Yeah.
You know,
I would say similarly in Mexico, that I maybe know a bit more, there are two countries that are quite traditional in the gender role, and that's why it was particularly interesting to have both of you here today, because you are universities that might not have the most progressive cultures around you, and despite all that, you're doing a great job.
But you know, if you really look into the Indian scriptures or your ancestors, you will see that they really went beyond. They accepted.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, there are many stories, but then the modern day world, I mean, we call it modern, but then, you know, our thinking or our attitudes haven't changed.
Okay, I have a challenge for everyone here. The 4th World Higher Education Conference is going to be, hopefully, in 10 years. Not that I'm going to make any official announcement here, but if we follow what we've been doing until now, in 10 years, we can see each other somewhere in the world again. I would love to have another panel that talked about what universities are doing for all genders. And I have high expectations of rectors coming saying this is all we do, because, you know, I know we move slow, but we are also giving you a fair bit of time to get there. So I'd love to have that conversation again with you. It's been a while that they told us that we are out of time. So I do want to respect, you know, everyone working here as well as the audience. So really having wanted to be here with you for much longer, and thanking each one of you, plus Elizabeth, our partners, the Times Higher Education, thank you very, very much. I would like to close this panel thanking the audience and being aware that there is still a lot to do, but also giving a bit of time to celebrate what we've achieved and what these universities have achieved and what the world have achieved thanks to women like Gloria until now. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Muy bien.
¿Quedamos aquí para una foto?
Sí.
Sí, claro.